Okay, last book update video where I show you every remaining book and or magazine that I've got. We're doing it from this angle because I've got most of them in a drawer owing to the fact that both of the bookshelves that I use to allocate my DVDs and the other books that I showed you are practically full, so there you go. So first other book that I've got is the original 26 Rare Ray series books put into one big volume. So these are all 26 volumes by the Reverend Audrey, I think you say. That I think I've only heard it pronounced once or twice before. Because even though it's called Thomas the Tank Engine, the complete collection, the series is really called the Railway series because it's supposed to be about various different trains and several different stories. Like in the very first book of that series, Thomas isn't even in it or mentioned. The people that made the show just, for whatever reason, chose to call it Thomas and Friends. Which is one reason why, after a certain point, you stop seeing the books being adapted into the series because less and less of them were about Thomas. Now, there is, well, was a compendium volume for the other books in the series that were written by this guy's son, Christopher, but that compendium is long out of print and it doesn't include the very last book, owing to that compendium being published before the last book, and there's also a bunch of supplemental books and stories that aren't included in that compendium either. Some of them all available for release separately, but I think that's really only if you're in the UK, honestly, so you're better off just scouring the internet to find people that have uploaded like PDFs of the books, or on here where people have uploaded audio of themselves narrating the books. So that's how I was able to get like every story possible for this series. If I remember to include all the links, they'll be done in the description, along with a couple of PDFs for books that are kind of tricky to find, provided they haven't been taken off the archive website yet. Now for the magazines. So at the grocery store that I work with, that's where I get all of these. And I mainly get them because a lot of these have various like timeline things included that make a nice reference guide for various people, but also I have the possibility to learn a few tidbits about them that I haven't before, so it's like, why not? So I've got two different editions of Marvel. The reason that I have two different versions is because this one has an extended timeline and replaces an interview in here with a different one, because this one was, it takes you up to like the end of Endgame for the timeline. This goes beyond it. One thing that's also a little advisory note, for lack of a better term, is that depending on who is publishing those magazines, they can easily be more text heavy or more picture heavy, which is why you'll notice that I have 3 different Spider-Man books, because this one is a little more picture heavy, but you still get some good text in there. This one is a lot more on the text, but you can't really see that well. It has also a good amount of white space in there, but if you actually flip through it, you can tell that it's different. And that this one is sort of the mixture of various things. But this one truly takes you into a lot of discussion about the more modern things with having a timeline in there. Yeah, I know that it's upside down. I'm sorry about that, but it's not that easy for me to do it like that. It's a cool thing to have. Then I've got a couple of Batman things. This one being the one that has the not so much timeline in it, but it has a lot of spin-offs of Batman stuff, like, you know, the Halle Berry Catwoman movie, the Teen Titans animated series. Oh, why haven't I taken that off? Huh. Yeah, because... Huh, there we go. It's not all the way off, but it's better in my mind. So this one is the one then that has the real timeline for it. I know I'm not going into these that much because a lot of these magazines, you can actually find information about them in like so many other forms, such as YouTube videos, actual books that have been published, and just, you know, but it's still nice to have various things like this if you're a fan and if they're well written, because this is one that's pretty well written, although it spoils so much about the show if you haven't watched it. But then like this is a nice reference guide for people that haven't really watched the movies, that kind of a thing, and also little bits of behind-the-scenes history, which is nice. Same thing with this, because it's got one heck of a timeline. But at the same time, sometimes you'll pick up a book of this, and it doesn't seem as good to get, because this book, this is a good example again. I mean, why would I have it if I didn't enjoy it? It has information about a couple adaptations of King Kong that I didn't even know existed. But, like, if you had the Life or Time Lord of the Rings magazine that they released, like, about a year or so ago, celebrating, like, the 20th anniversary of Fellowship of the Ring being released, well, that magazine was very heavy into talking about the Jackson movies and not really mentioning other Lord of the Rings stuff, which I think is rather unfortunate because I think they all deserve some mention, you know. And then when I looked at stuff for a particular Star Wars one, I was like, something tells me I shouldn't get this, even though I somewhat regret that now. Who knows? If I hunt around, I might be able to find them. I actually got those Batman magazines off eBay. Disney one, and this actually shows a couple of non-animated movies, but it also shows you the Pixar movies in that timeline as well. And then I've got two different Willy Wonka ones, because this one, which is the first one that I saw, which is actually already gone, believe it or not, this seems a lot more picture-heavy, that kind of a thing, even though it does have little bits of information that this one doesn't, but this one, despite the beginning seeming rather picture-heavy, once you flip through it, you can see that it has a little bit more on the text side, detailing some stuff. And as I said, it has little different bits of text. And yes, I do think that the prices of them are a little too expensive for what they are, especially since you can get these things in other sources, but there you go. Next up, I have a few books, non-fiction, that are written by a guy called Ray Dalio, or Dalio. And they're very interesting books because it gives you a decent perspective on like how various mechanics of life work and how you can boil it down into a couple of nice formulas and maybe even learn some good life lessons from them. His first book here, which is called Principles, albeit it's really called Life and Work Principles because there's supposed to be a second volume called Economic and Investment Principles, which there's no word as to whether or not he's going to release it, but I'm starting to think that he actually already has released it. You'll see what I mean when I show you the next couple of books. I'm currently in the middle of going through with this because it seems the most appropriate book to start out with of the three. It was the first published anyway, and I'm enjoying it, but the problem is I have to treat this more like as a project rather than as something that I'm reading for fun, because I really want to be using my brain for these books. His second book, Principles for Dealing with Changing World Order, is a book that details his belief that, like, the American empire is going to fall soon and be replaced by China as the dominant world country, and he describes how various patterns in history illustrate that, like, no world standard or company remains that standard for forever, that kind of a thing. He has 30-minute videos where he explains the big concepts for each of these books, along with various podcast interviews that he's done on here that are for free. So hunt around. You can learn a lot from him if you don't feel up to reading the whole books, which I do, because I actually have both these books and the Audible versions of them. And then there's also Principles for Navigating Big Debt Crises, hence why I kind of feel like he's already published the Economic and Investment Principle book. He just didn't call it that. Reason this one's bigger is because I think it presumably has some more graphs in it, although interestingly it's the one Audible book where he didn't narrate part of it. Not totally sure why, but whoever he has as the narrator, it's not a bad narrator. Now these next books I'm just going to be showing you more rapidly. We have the latest 2 volumes of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, a franchise I got into by pure chance when I was at university, and minus the bathroom joke bits, I'm actually becoming a fan of these. I've actually got audiobooks, I think, for every single one of them, except for maybe these, but that includes the spin-offs. I aim to get all these books eventually, because I think the audiobooks I'm missing tiny bits of jokes, and visually I might appreciate some of the jokes more if I actually have them. They're all cheap anyway. This is an author that I've had a bit of a desire to experiment with for a while, and I actually tried reading this before, but it didn't work because I got occupied with other things. Stephen King's It. Yeah, that's a big book. If I actually end up reading it, it's going to be my longest book that I've ever read. Another nonfiction book, The Oldest Rookie. This book is the basis of the movie The Rookie, which has Dennis Quaid in it. Saw most of that movie when I was younger. We called it in older years, enjoyed it, and hopefully I enjoy this down the line. Had to read this book for college, but I kept it because it was pretty good. To my very big surprise, The Glass Castle. I say that this was pretty good because it takes you a while to like fully understand what's going on in the book, because originally it starts off as a series of misadventures that the author gets into, but then you start getting more and more of an understanding of her family and their situation, and then it becomes quite bleak in the middle, but then you see how that's resolved. It's a good book. Like, originally I was just reading it for school, but I eventually reached a point in the book where I'm like, no, 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 this is great. But it took me a bit. Another book that I had to read for school, but I really enjoyed, Speak. And I actually read pretty much all of this author's other young adult books, but I ended up having some kind of an issue with all of them, despite the fact that they're all really well done books. Maybe just a little too well, I guess, but you can tell that I am a fan of it because, come on, come on. Got the movie. I don't care about a notification. I won't need to worry about that for much longer. Another book I had to read for college, Naked in the Promised Land, describes the author's experiences of growing up in a America that was less understanding of gay people throughout various decades, and how she discovered that she was gay. Band of Misfits, chronologing the 2010 San Francisco Giants. Nice book. A bummer that they never made any others, but I think you can understand why they didn't if you're a sports fan. First Jurassic Park book. I did have the second one at one point, but I got rid of it. I am to get it back eventually. The book Battle Royale is a nice book, but it takes you a bit to actually get someplace. Come on, come on, come on. The Divergent Trilogy by Veronica Roth. I've only read the first book and change, along with a good amount of this, because I learned that a decent amount of it takes place before the first book. But when I try to read it again, I think I'll wait to read this until after I finish the others, because that's when that one was released. I've mentioned this book once or twice on the channel before, I think. Alex Haley's Roots. Took me like a year of on and off reading to get through it, but I finally did. I never did get the other book that he wrote, the one that was called Queen, and I don't think I will at this point. The interest in reading that has long since evaporated. Film novelization of the 2004 Riddick movie. I aim to collect the other film novelizations because I think it's a nice insight into the universe. Shadow Divers, a pretty interesting book. I know that there's a book that like attacks the truthfulness of this one. I'm not gonna bother with that, not so much because of nostalgia for this, but because just look at the reviews on Amazon. It doesn't seem worth it. The original Dune book. I want to try and read that someday. A couple more of Michael Crichton's books. Airframe and Next. Was surprised at how much I liked this book. I really needed to give this a reread because even though I understand the broad plot of it, how you got from point A to point B in a few situations, that I did miss. Novelizations for the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. There was a period when I was younger that I was super into collecting novelizations. I got rid of a bunch of them, but I still have them. Ben Affleck Daredevil. Got the Dark Knight trilogy, although these two are written by the same guy. They changed authors for this one. You can really tell the difference. And then finally, I'm not going to pull all of these out. I've got all 40 books of Left Behind the Kids series, but I should point out that these books have subsequently been re-released in 12 bigger volumes of books that apparently correct a lot of mistakes that relate to this series and the adult series. Having tried to read a bunch of these when I was younger, I did notice some mistakes with the adult series, even though I only got like a third of the way in for the kids series and halfway for the adult. Well, halfway through the main adult series. I did read the prequels first. Okay, well then that's every book that I own that I haven't showed you. See you in the next vid.